The dusty plains of Texas shimmered under the weight of the afternoon sun. Sheriff Cole Cowboy Turner leaned against a weathered fence post, the brim of his hat shading sharp eyes that had seen too much yet never flinched. Dust Rock, his town, slept in silence until the stillness cracked. A deep rumble rolled across the earth, faint at first, then pounding like war drums. Glass rattled in saloon windows, horses snorted nervously, and townsfolk peeked from behind shutters. Cole stood straight, boots planted firm, as three shadows stretched longer than church steeples and kept on growing across the plain. From the horizon, they came three colossal women, taller than any barn, taller even than the grain silos that guarded Dust Rock's edge. The townsfolk gawked in disbelief, whispers rising like frightened birds. Their steps shook loose shingles from rooftops, each movement a reminder of impossible power. Yet their faces were carved with playful mischief, not malice. They moved like sisters sharing a secret joke, striding straight for the sheriff as though drawn by destiny. One smirked, crossing her arms, and her voice rolled like thunder, teasing, "Think you can handle all three of us, cowboy?" A hush fell, broken only by the restless stamping of hooves. Women clutched their children, men pulled back into alleys, but Cole didn't move. He spat a grain of dust from his mouth, eyes steady beneath his hat. "Reckon I can," he answered, words quiet yet firm enough to carry. It wasn't bravado, it was grit of the kind Dust Rock was built on. His voice steadied the crowd, though his heart hammered against his ribs. He knew giants didn't walk the earth without reason. This was no accident. This was a test, and they had chosen him. The first giantess crouched, her knees cracking the hard ground. Her hair, black as midnight, swept across the sky as she studied the man before her. "You don't look afraid," she said, her grin widening. Cole tilted his head, replying cool as creek water, "Fear wastes time. I prefer standing." The townsfolk murmured at his composure, surprised that their sheriff could stare down mountains wearing women's faces. The second giantess, taller still, chuckled like rolling thunder. "Let's see if your strength matches your words," she boomed, lifting a massive barrel from her belt and dropping it beside him with a thud. Cole crouched beside the barrel, dust puffing beneath his boots. He gripped its iron rings, the weight nearly yanking him forward, but he steadied his stance. Sweat prickled his brow as muscles burned. Slowly, painfully, he lifted it above his head, arms trembling but unbroken. The crowd roared with pride, children climbing wagons to see their sheriff defy the impossible. The first giantess slapped her palm against her thigh in laughter, impressed. "Not bad, little man," she said. Cole set the barrel down with a grunt, rolling his shoulders. "Strength ain't in size," he said, "it's in will." The second giantess narrowed her eyes, her tone turning sly. "Strength we've seen. Now let's test your wits." She leaned close, her breath gusting like hot wind over the plains. She spoke a riddle, words twisting sharp as barbed wire. Cole frowned, thinking hard, sweat streaking his dusted face. He pictured his late father teaching him riddles by the fire, lessons in patience and logic. With a smirk, he gave his answer simple, sharp, and correct. Gasps rose from the crowd as the giantess pulled back, surprised, then laughed deep from her chest. "Clever cowboy," she admitted. "You've got brains under that hat." Then came the third, her gaze heavier than the others. She knelt, her shadow swallowing him whole. Her voice was softer, though it carried more weight than all before. "Strength. We'd a broken bar, but do you have courage?" she asked. With a hand bigger than a wagon, she reached down, fingers curling gently toward him. The townsfolk screamed, fearing she'd crush him. But Cole didn't move. He looked straight into her eyes, unflinching, even as her hand closed around him like a living cage. For a heartbeat, the world was silent. Then she lifted him high, their gazes locked in quiet understanding. The air was thin up there, the plains stretching wide beneath his boots dangling over emptiness. Cole's voice rang steady. "Courage isn't standing tall when it's easy," he said. "It's standing tall when you'd rather run." For a long moment, she studied him, then smiled, setting him gently back on the ground. The other two nodded in agreement, their laughter booming like summer storms. "You've passed, cowboy," the tallest declared. "Dust Rock has nothing to fear while you guard it." With the final wave, they turned, each step shaking the land until their figures shrank against the horizon and were gone. The town exploded with cheers, hats tossed high, voices ringing against the clear Texas sky. Children rushed to Cole's boots, pulling at his coat, shouting his name. Men clapped his back, women thanked him through tears, but Cole only tipped his hat low, a quiet smile on his lips. Giants or no, he muttered to himself, a man's got to stand for his people. As the sun sank toward the horizon, Dust Rock glowed with pride. The legend of the cowboy who faced 3 giant women would echo through campfires and saloons, carried like wind across the wide open plains. The tallest giantess stepped forward, her shadow swallowing the sheriff whole. The earth groaned under her weight, but her movements were deliberate, controlled. Instead of swinging a hand or raising a foot, she bent low and set a massive barrel at Cole's boots. Its iron hoops gleamed in the sun, heavy enough to crush any ordinary man. "If you're as tough as they say," she rumbled, her voice deep as canyon echoes, "show us your strength." The crowd held its breath. Cole cracked his neck, dust clinging to his shirt, and crouched before the barrel as if facing an old rival. He pressed his calloused palms against the wood, arms straining as he heaved with a grunt. The weight threatened to pin him, but he steadied his stance, every muscle in his frame burning. Slowly, inch by inch, the barrel rose, higher, higher, until at last it hovered above his head. A cry erupted from the townsfolk, children cheering, women waving handkerchiefs, men pumping their fists skyward. The barrel quaked in his hands, but Cole's resolve held. With one last surge, he lifted it high and stood tall, the picture of determination beneath the towering gaze of giants. The first giantess slapped her thigh in laughter, the sound rolling like thunder through the town. "Not bad, little man," she teased, her eyes light with respect. Cole lowered the barrel carefully, sweat streaking his weathered face, and answered with a grin. "Strength ain't measured by size," he said, steady as ever. "It's measured by will." His words, simple yet sharp, cut through the silence that followed, settling into the hearts of those watching. The people of Dust Rock saw more than a sheriff they saw a symbol. Someone who stood, unshaken, even when giants tested the metal of his bones. The second giantess, taller still and sharp-eyed as a hawk, stepped forward with a sly grin. "Strength we've seen," she said, her voice sly. "But let's test your mind." She leaned down, the breeze of her breath scattering dust, and began to spin riddles. Each one twisted and tangled, words bent like desert mirages. Cole narrowed his eyes, recalling his father's voice from long ago. Nights by the fire where riddles had been tools of teaching, not games. He answered each one without hesitation, his cowboy calm never faltering. The townsfolk gasped in awe at every reply, pride swelling with each victory. The giantess raised a brow, surprised and amused. "Clever cowboy," she said, a chuckle rolling from her chest like distant thunder. "Brains under that hat, who would have thought?" Cole tilted his hat slightly, lips curling in the faintest smile. "A man don't survive long in Texas without wit," he replied. His words rang with truth, echoing the spirit of every settler who had braved storm, drought, and danger to carve Dust Rock from the plains. For the townsfolk, each solved riddle wasn't just a triumph for their sheriff, it was a triumph for them all, proof their little town could stand proud. Then the third giantess bent low, her eyes vaster and bright as twin moons, holding a different kind of weight. "Strength and wit you have," she said, her voice softer, almost solemn. "But do you have courage?" Her hand, larger than a wagon, stretched toward him. The crowd screamed, some calling for him to run, others frozen in terror. But Cole didn't flinch. He stood as steady as the church steeple, eyes locked on hers. She curled her fingers gently around him, lifting him into the air, the ground falling away until Dust Rock looked no bigger than a toy set below. The wind whipped around him, his boots dangling in the void, yet his face stayed calm, his gaze firm. "Courage," he called out, his voice steady despite the height, "isn't standing tall when it's easy. It's standing tall when fear tells you to fall." For a long heartbeat, silence stretched across the plains. The giantess studied him, her enormous eyes narrowing, then softening. At last, she smiled, the corners of her lips curling like sunrise. Carefully, she lowered him back to the earth, setting him on his feet as if he were made of glass. Dust Rock erupted in gasps of relief. The three giants shared a look, their expressions no longer playful but respectful. Laughter bubbled from them, warm and booming, shaking the earth not in menace but in celebration. "You've got heart, Cowboy," the tallest declared, her voice echoing across the plains. "Dust Rock is safe while you guard it." They straightened, their figures blotting out the sky one last time. With strides that carried them like moving mountains, they turned and walked toward the horizon. Each step thundered softer and softer, until the three giants were nothing more than silhouettes against the endless Texas sun. As silence settled, the townsfolk erupted in cheers. Hats flew into the air, children swarmed the sheriff's booths, and voices rang together in celebration. "Sheriff Turner! Sheriff Turner!" they cried, their pride spilling across the dusty streets. Men clapped his back, women offered thanks through tears, and children tugged at his coat, eyes bright with wonder. But Cole only tipped his hat, his calm grin never fading. "Giants or no," he muttered, his voice just loud enough for those closest to hear, "a man's got to stand for his people." The setting sun painted Dust Rock gold as legend was born. Long after the giants vanished, long after the cheers quieted, Dust Rock would remember. Around saloon tables and campfires, the tale would be told, how one sheriff faced three giants with nothing but grit, wit, and courage, and how he stood, never bending, until even giants laughed with respect. The story became more than memory, it became Dust Rock's heart, a reminder that pride and courage could tower higher than any giant. Cole Turner, their cowboy sheriff, walked the street that night as if nothing had changed. Yet everyone knew everything had changed. Dust Rock now had a legend,